For this video, we're not going to cover obvious, long-running, expected to be produced, widely accepted cars from companies that we expect them from. So without further ado, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about with the very first car in this video. The legendary F-Sports Apex, the LFA. The Lexus LFA is part of the F lineup, which has been around since 2006, making it extremely recent, which perfectly qualifies for this video. Like I said, it is not a long-running vehicle, and it certainly was not expected to be produced by Lexus. Normally when you think of Lexus, you think of very normal, under-the-radar types of vehicles. They're more or less up-batch Toyotas. They're still reliable, they have great luxury, but they're not trying to be the best at anything. They're not going to be the most eye-catching cars, they're not going to be the fastest cars, and they're not going to be super loud cars. All of which the LFA basically said, oops. The LFA's existence, also known as the Lexus F-Sport Apex or Lexus Fuji Apex, lives up to its name for being the apex of the F-Sport moniker. Not just at the time of release, but even to this day, it is still one of their faster cars that they've produced. The screaming V10 in it makes a beautiful sonorous roar, as it was tuned by Yamaha, who's known for making pianos, so if they're good at making instruments, they obviously can make great sounding cars and great sounding cross-plane engine motorcycles. The LFA's impact was so long-lasting and so prominent on the company of Lexus that they would increase the funding to the F-Sport division and actually make the F moniker be more prevalent throughout their brand. The ISF, the RCF, and even releasing track editions of the LFA as well as the RCF, Lexus actually cares about performance. They care about making exciting looking cars with exciting performance to boot. Their mantra has changed because of the LFA and because of what it brought to their company, the attention it did, and really just, it's strange. Strange when you think about this low production car making such a huge impact to the brand as a whole, and in my opinion, that's why a lot of companies need to realize how important a flagship is. What sits at the very top is what everyone is going to see. Even if that's not the car they actually end up buying or want to buy, it'll make them see the brand in another light. Think of it as capturing hype. The next vehicle we're going to discuss is the Lamborghini Diablo. While the LFA changed its company for its positive impact, the Diablo changed it because of rather a negative history and its very troubled past. This is not me being a hater. Calm down, fanboys, calm down. I'm a huge fanboy of the Lamborghini Diablo myself, to the point I think it's the best V12 Lambo ever made. But get this, true fanboys would know its history. Yeah, I said it. If you actually consider yourself a fanboy, read up on its history and then cry in sorrow as you realize that it is a very tragic story. The Diablo changed Lamborghini as a company because truly it was nothing but suffering. This was a car that was basically shoveled to the side by Chrysler and completely abused by Megatech and completely parted out to the point that its engine would find its way to the Vector M12 and its chassis would be shared with the CZ V16T. This is the first flagship Lamborghini V12 model to not be bespoke. And that is a tragedy in the company's history when you consider that usually only the V10 models will share components, or maybe the V8 models, but the V12 models from Lamborghini are usually considered sacred. They're the flagship, they're the absolute best. But the poor Diablo was not a Diablo. It was also a Vector, it was also Cizeta. It was not bespoke, and it had bus taillights with a Nissan 300ZX headlights. It was a complete parts bin car. It even had drum brakes in its early years. Drum brakes on a supercar, ladies and gentlemen. People like to hate Audi for what they've quote-unquote done to Lamborghini. I don't know what you guys are talking about. What they done to Lamborghini is save them. You have to actually look at Lamborghini's history. Megatech was basically about to bankrupt Lamborghini. They were basically about to disappear. If you are a true fan of their company, that's the last thing you'd want. Since Audi obtained Lamborghini, the latter years of the Diablo would see racing success, and more importantly, it would end up just being a cool car. Chances are, childhood you remember two Diablos, the Chrysler version of the Diablo or the later Audi version of it. And trust me, no one wanted to remember the drum brake part spin Megatech version of it. The Hyundai Genesis. You know a car is extremely influential when its very name spawns an entire separate brand. Now, of course, this video is called Cars That Changed Their Company, but I will focus on how the Genesis not only made Genesis, but also influenced Hyundai themselves. When we think of Hyundai, we think of the automotive punching bag for the earlier part of the 21st century. Rightfully so. Earlier 2000s Hyundais and so on and so forth just weren't the greatest cars, and cars before the 2000s 2000s were bordering on certain levels of sketchy, like literally they would be basically driving death traps. And that distrust made it where Hyundai now had to prove to the newest generation why they should bother buying them. And Hyundai did a pretty decent job of this at first. They made the Genesis sedan, and it would be nothing remarkable. It wasn't the most luxurious car, it wasn't the fastest car, it wasn't the most cool looking car, but it was surprisingly affordable, especially in the secondhand market. People who never considered a Hyundai before found themselves not just looking at one, but actually buying one and finally coming to the conclusion of they're not that half bad. In fact, they're kind of coming some ways along. This slightly more positive perception of Hyundai was just enough momentum to finally start a roll against the negativity that they've had built up through their previous history. The Genesis sedan's hype would be followed by the Genesis Coupe. The Genesis Coupe is a very nice sporty looking car that has decent style and decent comfort while also being a pretty good performer, surprisingly. It also has the honor of having some of the most aftermarket amongst any Korean cars currently out there, and this was the car that finally made people use KDM. It was a Korean tuner, and to have the word tuner be associated with a Korean car further skyrocketed people's appeal and thought not just of Hyundai's but of Genesis. And when Hyundai saw this, they're like, okay, we're gonna branch it off into its whole brand. The name Genesis, albeit very new, shocked a lot of luxury car owners by showing them that you can have the mind-blowing concept that is, you can have an affordable and decently reliable luxury vehicle. And this success would not just reflect only in the new brand that was open. Even though Genesis is now a separate brand, all of their advancements that are accomplished still find their way back onto normal Hyundais and even Kias, as both those companies do share a lot of intel and information with each other. Hence why Hyundai now has a newly found N performance brand. Also, what is with companies and choosing one arbitrary letter and just making it the name of their performance? Okay. The final car we're going to talk about this video is the Koenigsegg Agera. While younger viewers may find this entry contradictory to what I just said in the intro, I'll remind you of how young this company still is. They were founded in 1994. The 90s. While some companies were still evolving their sports cars, a humble car maker in Sweden was speedrunning the make a world-class hypercar any percent in just a mere few decades. This is not an expected result at all. It's actually a shock, especially for anyone who was born in the 90s, to hear of this company, to actually think that such a company would even still be around. No one would have expected this 30 years ago from this tiny Swedish automaker. The world's fastest car title has long since been dominated by Bugatti, and that makes sense. They're a company that's been around for a literal century. On top of that, they have tons and tons of funding from Volkswagen's giant conglomerate. Any challenger who approaches or tries to take this title is quickly dethroned after just a mere year of taking it from Bugatti. Bugatti's reign seemed rather endless, like they would just forever be the consistently fastest car in the world. No one company alone could consistently punch back at them. Like I said, they were all just one-hit wonders. Come in, say something, do something, gets punched out. Come in, say something, do something, gets punched out. But finally someone stood in the ring that would consistently trade blows with Bugatti. The Agera lineup was the first serious sustained attempt to make a car as good as, and sometimes even better than, a Bugatti. The earliest model of Agera is mostly known for being beautiful. The later R model is when talking finally became rather extreme. People were like, whoa, this car is claiming some extreme numbers. It might just beat the Bugatti Veyron Super Sport. Of course, talk is cheap. The 1-to-1 was a display of their tenacity and an open declaration of war against Bugatti, that they weren't going anywhere anytime soon. The model after would actually be a detuned version of the 1-to-1 made to meet the 25 production car requirement to claim the world's fastest car. The Koenigsegg Agera RS, even though no longer the fastest car now, was one of the most brutally fast cars at the time it was created. It was also an extremely honest real-world display to actually show all of the feats it was doing with all the footage in live time to back it up. It was a car that understood the people that loved it, made by a man who understood the fans who cheered it. A lot of companies like to talk greater than thou, especially when the term of hypercar is made to only make 1%ers jerk off to them. The lack of pompousness and the closeness to fans that Koenigsegg had would make them very, very memorable and finally solidified them as, wow, this is not just a one-hit wonder company. They can consistently make cars that not only remind the world that they exist, but also keeps Bugatti at their edge. And honestly, if I were the people in Molsheim, France, I'd be smiling. And I'm sure in some weird, twisted way they are smiling, because Bugatti for the longest time has probably been waiting for someone to trade blow after blow with. Having said that, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something new from it. If you like automotive content, make sure to like this video and make sure to subscribe and check out my other videos. Other than that though, thank you all for watching and tuning in as always. See y'all next time. Bladed Angel out.